Welcome to Two Deep Hokies Under the Influence, a Sons of Saturday podcast. I'm your host, Pete B. I've got my co-host, Sam Jesse, here, but I've also got another gentleman. Chris Givens is joining us, a friend of the pod, a guy who's recorded with us in the past. Chris, how you doing tonight, man?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, Pete.
Yeah, no problem at all. Sam, welcome. Good to see you again. I
Hi,
feel like
Pete.
I see your face every day.
It's kind of
Once we've
crazy.
recorded
I
this.
tell people to this who are outside the Sons of Saturday team, but there are people in this Sons of Saturday realm. I think I've talked to, like, had a text message from or talked to pretty much every day of my life for 3+ years now.
It feels
No
that way.
exaggeration.
With the
Yeah.
text threads and the Twitter chains, and yeah, it's pretty endless. But why don't you kick us off with the cheers, my friend?
Well, my cheers is to the women's basketball team for Virginia Tech. Big win against Rutgers. That's a proud Rutgers program. So anytime you can beat them, that's good. They had a really strong fourth quarter, looked good. That's a Big Ten win. Feels like a resume builder for this team who is, I think, like, the goal is make the tournament. And if they do, that would be a really good accomplishment in year one for Megan Duffy. So
Yeah.
that was a building block result for the Hokies.
Cheers, buddy. All right. Well, Virginia Tech, despite what some people might have said, I thought we won the bye week. Maybe 21-7, so still not a one-score win, but I think we did win. Maybe the practice report, not so much. We'll get into the depth chart, some of the injury updates and things like that in a second. But first, I did want to kind of welcome Chris back to the show and ask him, so our listeners know who haven't heard you on here before. You grew up a Duke fan, but then you attended Virginia Tech. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I grew up in Durham. My dad graduated from Duke. I grew up really specifically a diehard Duke football fan, which if you saw Duke football play from 2000 to about 2012, that was a pretty rough experience growing up. But ended up going to school at Virginia Tech. And I've shed a lot of my Duke fandom. It really, my fandom only comes up at the Duke UNC game. But for football, I still like to follow along pretty closely. I've had a lot of friends who have been involved in the program, and it just kind of reminds me of home. And it's a good way for me to kind of bond with my dad as well, going to games and things like that. So I
Are
feel
you planning
like,
on attending?
yeah, I am planning on attending this weekend.
Nice.
I'll be there, Chris. Pack your jacket.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You said that year of 2012, and that's kind of is the cutoff, right? Where things started to turn for Virginia Tech and then turn the opposite way for Duke. Because if you look at their last, I guess that would be 12, 13 seasons. They've won 9 games 4 times in that time period. More than Virginia Tech. They've been the more successful program. I know there were some rough years at the end of Cutcliffe and before Elko got there, but Elko came in, made them immediately good. They're trying to have their third straight 8+ win season. They might even get to 10 if they were to win their last 3 games. So it's been remarkable. And do you feel like you got off the bus too soon? I mean, I know you still kind of root for the Duke Blue Devils, but what is your level? Do you still will you make it a priority to watch Duke football every weekend?
Yeah, I make it a priority to watch both Virginia Tech and Duke every week. On a Saturday, I'm watching college football all day anyways. It's just, instead of watching a big game every now and then, I'll throw on Duke UConn instead.
Sam likes doing that kind of stuff too.
Yeah.
Well, listen, let's do a little bit of news and notes, and then we'll get back to kind of doing our full Duke preview with Chris. But jump in here too. I want to mention the college football playoff rankings. We did this last week because we weren't doing a recap and a preview, and this one we only have a preview. So just a quick thing, Sam. Boise was the 4 seed, and BYU was at the 12. You'll also notice, and this was my biggest gripe of the rankings, was that BYU was behind SMU, even though they have the same amount of losses and BYU beat them in Dallas. I cannot make sense of that one. All the other ones I could probably come up with something, but that doesn't make any sense.
So this is what I am gathering from the playoff committee right now. I think they get into that room and they just go, who do we think are the best 12 football teams? Let's rank them like 1 through 12. And they have all of these like team sheets with advanced metrics and strength of record and all this jazz on there. And I don't think they look at a single bullet point. I think they just rank the teams and then they say, hey, you go on ESPN. We're going to give you all these sheets and you make sense of what we just did. I think that's what they're doing.
Typically, though, there's at least like a little bit of an attention to head to head when the records are equal.
But it's different between every game. Like the reasoning between ranking SMU ahead of BYU is different than the reasoning from ranking other teams compared to each other.
Yeah.
Like they're not consistent team to team. And that's why I think like I don't think they're looking at any of this stuff. I think they're just eyeballing the 12
in
teams.
an effort. Well, a lot of times in the past, and Chris, feel free to jump in on any of these points, but in the past, if they thought a team was better, but maybe the other one had a head to head, they would space them by a pick to make it like, oh no, we clearly think that SMU is better than BYU. So we're putting Tennessee under SMU, but ahead of BYU. So you know that we just think they have far better wins. They didn't even do that this time. They literally put them next to each other. So it just seemed that was the one. I know Kirby Smart's mad about wherever he is. And it's like, you're in there, dude. Like you lost 2 games and you're in there. And my whole thing with all of it is for these SEC teams griping about they should get in. Tennessee fans are mad because they weren't in last night. You lost 2 games. You didn't lose 1 game. You lost 2. You lose all of the argument when you lose 2 games. If they happen to think someone else is better, there's no way you can't say you are, because I mean you can make the argument, but like you lost 2 games. So I'm sorry. Like the fact that 2-game losers are getting into a playoff, which we knew would happen, is a little bit silly anyway, but that's where we are with the 12 team. And they're probably eventually expanded even farther. But the whole thing was supposed to be like, okay, we got 12 teams. Number 13 can't complain. No, 13's going to complain.
Well, 13's going to complain because of the G5 rule. And I think that's what's going to bring it up. And I think it'll work itself out a little bit more than it is right now. Like there's some big games left, right? Texas A&M. Tennessee still has to travel to Vanderbilt. Ole Miss has to travel to Florida. The Iron Bowl's never easy for Alabama.
Notre Dame has 2 tough games.
Yeah, Army.
Notre Dame has 2 tough
Notre
games.
Dame.
Yeah, Army and Notre Dame, and then Notre Dame has to travel to USC.
Yep. Penn State, Minnesota. Yep.
Yeah, it's gonna work out a little bit. And I think this is like the importance of the conference championship is going to show itself this year, because we will get SMU playing Miami. We will get the 2 best-ish teams in the Big 12 playing against each other. We will get another head-to-head in the SEC to really define like who is better. So I think the conference championships will help a lot of this. A lot of people think that they just need to get rid of it. It's a dumb thing to use conference champion as some metric of a bye week. But I think it's going to help it out. Yeah, you got to use something, and it's going to help.
And at least it's hard and fast. Like you can't argue about that. Like if they win the conference, they're in.
Mm-hmm.
Now if the 4 seed being Boise instead of BYU, now Big 12 people are going to argue about that, or in this case, it could be Colorado or BYU. But you get my point. Like that will be an argument. But I still think like if these 2 Big 12 teams go like chalk and then one wins the end, like they'll be the 4 seed. I believe. Like if Colorado has 2 losses and beats BYU, Chris, don't you think they would end up being the 4th seed ahead of Boise?
I would think so, but I think it's a little hard to tell. I feel like the committee sometimes flip-flops their reasoning for picks week by week. So I think there's just so many factors and metrics included that you can sometimes get either too into the weeds or not dive in too far, and you can kind of get muddled in kind of the noise of the data.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. And that's what kind of Sam has been echoing. Like we've put a lot of work into our like playoff picks throughout the year on College Football Monday. And ultimately, like we don't know what the committee's going to do. We didn't know they were going to use, oh, well, quarterback's injured, can't put an undefeated Florida State in. Like that's something that they never had to rely on in the past, but they used it. Like they actually used it to the advantage for Ohio State in 2014. Like backup quarterback, well, they're playing good, so we're going to put Ohio State in. Like they'll do whatever they want at the end of the day to get the result that they want. And what they want is at least 4 SEC teams in, maybe even 5. Like if Notre Dame falls out for some reason, it's going to be a 5th SEC team.
Well, I'll be curious if Texas A&M beats Texas. Do you drop Texas from 2 to 13 or something, or 2 to 12 because they lost on the road at a top 15 team? Like, is that an 11 spot drop? Because I mean, when Tennessee lost to Georgia, that wasn't an 11 spot drop. When Georgia lost to Alabama, it was an 11 spot drop. Like you would have to sit.
Texas doesn't have the wins. So I think they would, and they would have 2 losses. So
they should, or they would.
Right. Well, that's the ultimate question, right? Go. And what would be really funny, Sam, in that scenario, Texas A&M goes on, they win the SEC. Okay. So now they're in no matter what. Then you've got to deal with Tennessee and Texas wanting to be in there in addition to the other. So you like, I don't know. It would just create such an interesting mess, and they'd probably put them all in at the end of the day, especially if Notre Dame lost. But we can move on from that unless you guys have any final notes on it. We got to get to some tech stuff here. Depth chart injury update. On Monday or Tuesday, Pry said Drones, Tootin, and Malachi were questionable. Today, Drones did not practice. Tootin did practice. Malachi was in a boot. He's not going to play this weekend. Got Snell in blue. He's been in blue all year. Keller's in blue. And Jalen Jones is in blue. Of note, Tucker Holloway also running around out there getting some routes in. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, I believe he could still redshirt at this point.
He didn't redshirt his freshman year.
Yeah, so he can still redshirt if he gets in. I don't know if you put him in. I don't think they need
like what's the
wide receiver depth at this point. So he's probably just out there getting reps, which is good. I am worried about this running back room. Like Tootin they're saying game time decision for Tootin. That sounds like a no.
Did you hear what Pry said though today? Like
do you have the exact
Yeah, wordage? I have the exact quote. It's right here. It was that's the Keelan Adams quote. The Keelan Adams quote was, I think Keelan Adams jumps out. He's gotten work with the varsity team lately, current listed as the backup slot receiver. So maybe we'll see Brody Adams. But the thing with Tootin was he essentially said this is the best he's looked at this point in the week since like the BC week. And so basically it sounded like he feels good about Tootin playing.
Yeah. I don't believe him. I'm sorry. I will believe it when I see it from Drones and Tootin with the health, because it just doesn't seem to be, doesn't look good.
Yeah.
And with those ankle injuries, they can last over a month.
Yeah, I was just going to say, to me, the Clemson game, which was not that long ago, 4 snaps he was in, he did not look like he was a week and a half away from being ready to play full speed again.
I agree with that. I do agree with that.
Yeah.
So it's very hard to say. That quote though, if you're reading just being naive, perhaps it sounded like Tootin was going to play. And he did play against Clemson, but it wasn't good. So even if he does play, are we going to get some Coney carries, right? You have to run Coney regardless if Tootin's 80% or what.
Elephant in the room topic. Who's the starting quarterback?
Right.
I'm going to be honest with you. I think it's Colin Schley.
It's got to be, right? If he didn't practice today, it's Wednesday.
Yeah. I mean, so apparently Drones did practice some, just not while it was open.
Okay.
So he was out there some. I don't.
Insider Sam. No, I'm just kidding.
I understand Colin Schley also isn't at 100%, but what we've seen from Kyron Drones when he's not at 100%, it's not good. and it like does not help the team and it doesn't help him. I think you got to go. Like, if you want to win this game, you have to go with Colin Schlee. He's going to be your best shot to win this game, especially like we'll talk about with this Duke preview, going up against a team that creates a lot of hurries. They blitz a lot. They're aggressive on the defensive front seven. You're going to need a mobile quarterback back there. And right now, the more mobile quarterback is Colin Schlee. Colin Schlee is also has a lot more zip on his ball right now than Kyron.
In the Syracuse game, that was pretty clear right off the bat. He was really, firing some darts in there.
Yeah.
All right, a couple more notes here. Pick'em leaders, Sean D08 is in first. Fitted Jones and NRV Tigers are tied for second. Bunch of people real close to there. I am in ninth place. I am 8 wins out of first. So it's not completely over for me. We'll see. But good job, Sean D08, keeping that first place position. All right, men's basketball. We are playing Jacksonville right now. The beginning of the second half didn't start well. I don't know if you saw that. Oh, Jacksonville is winning by 4 right now.
Yeah, they're outscoring Tech 19-5 in the second half right now, and they're up 4.
Jeez Louise. This is another night where we're under 40% from the field. Like,
I mean, they're 4-15 from 3. That's the
this team can't shoot. Like,
No.
I don't.
Which Pete, I don't know how much you know about basketball, but putting the ball in the back bucket is like really key.
It's called basketball. The ball has to go into the basket. So
you gotta score points to win games.
You really do. And so Lawal had a really nice stretch at the end of the first half where he scored like 3 or 4 straight baskets. Ben Hammond's hair looks really cool out there, flopping around. Big kind of fro situation, but man, they got to win this game. They got to come back and find a way to win this game. It was notable that Tyler Johnson started in place of Jaden Young in this game. So the freshman getting some run, which is something we've been wanting from Mike Jones, to give some of these good freshmen run, and he's doing that for Johnson. Make sure to like the video and subscribe. We are brought to you by Jack and Coke. You guys know Jack and Coke. 2 legends, 1 can. I'll talk about it a little bit later. Let's get to Duke, guys. I think my tease would be, I think this is actually a really good matchup for Virginia Tech on defense, not so much on offense, and we'll get into the reasons why. November 23rd, it's the 8 p.m. slot in Wallace Wade. What is a night game in Wallace Wade like, Chris? Is it an electric environment? Will it be mostly Hokies fans? Like, what can we expect?
Yeah, that's a great question. So have either of y'all been to Wallace Wade anytime in the last 3 or 4 years?
Not the last 3 or 4 for me.
I think it's been about 4 years, I think.
Okay. So the stadium went through a really significant renovation around it was like 2016 or so. But Duke has done a lot recently to try and push the boundaries of what's normal at a college football game. And what I mean by that is they're trying a lot of unique things that you would kind of expect from an NFL atmosphere. They've got, all the cool lights that you're seeing in all the college football stadiums now, but they've also...
Not all of them.
Not all. Well, I can think of one.
I don't care about the lights, to be clear. Like, I don't care about the LED lights, but Duke has them.
Yeah, they've also got the nice in-stadium Wi-Fi. It's a really enjoyable stadium to be at, except for this massive deck that they've put into the end zone. I don't know if y'all have seen pictures of this, but it's this deck that has taken out about 6,000 seats of the stadium. And what they're doing is they've put a DJ into the middle of the deck.
I've heard about this.
And then they've got like cornhole, and it's like, so it's interesting. And, they apparently had done a lot of market research, and this is just kind of where they see college football going, which, to be honest, they might be right. I think they just might be, 15-ish years ahead of the curve on this. So it's just a little wonky at the time.
Is it really like this, like deck above the back, like end zone? Is that what you're talking about?
That's exactly it. Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like a terrace almost. It's hard to see on my phone, but
yeah, they call it the Devil's Deck. It's the biggest deck in the country.
And have you been in the deck or just seen it?
No, the deck is brand new. I've seen it, but this is the first year, and I've only been to 2 games this year, I think. It looks
Has the
weird.
reception
That's all I'll
been?
say.
Is there are the fans like uniformly not liking it, or do some fans enjoy it, or what?
So here's the thing about Duke's fan base. They're very new to the idea of college football, except for the very few number of OGs that are out there, which there aren't many. But the new fans, I think, like it because it does make football a little more accessible. You kind of pay attention to the game, but you're also there to kind of have like a social outing. And I think the new fans like that. But me personally, I'm not so sure about it. And I'm really not a fan of the DJ atmosphere. I would much rather hear a college band 100 times out of 100.
Yeah, Chris just wants to watch ball. That's why you're at Wallace Wade. You just want to watch a football game.
Well, I've heard it gives off kind of like AAA baseball vibes, where you're in a big, it's not a big stadium, but you're in a large sports venue, and it is very though. It's more about, like what you said, the fan engagement is what they're going for. And that is the direction that a lot of minor league and summer league baseball goes towards. Like, you'll hear a lot of people who work in that industry say, what you want is for your fans to only come away from the game saying they had a great time. They shouldn't remember the score. Like, it should just be about having a good time. I don't know if Duke football is necessarily about that, but that is a large idea in the industry for putting on sporting events. So I'm excited to see. I'm going to be on the total other side of the stadium, like tucked into section 1 with all the other Hokies. So I'll be able to see it, but I probably won't be over there.
Yeah, same. I don't think they're just going to be in section 1.
That is true.
I think it's going to be a plurality. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting concept. And here's the thing: is this is the most Duke has ever invested this much into their football program. And so they're really throwing a lot of cash, into their NIL funds, into their stadium, and to their atmosphere in general. And I think you're seeing some results, but it's still a little early. But they're just trying to build this fan base up. They're trying to really make it Durham's team and not just Duke, which I think is a really good idea, because there's always been a little bit of a disconnect between the university and the city of Durham.
Yeah, well, I want to get into some of the more nuts and bolts of the matchup and things like that, but that is really interesting what you said about the investment, because I know when Elko came in there, they staffed it out big time. Like, they moved to like more than 40 staffers, similar to what Pitt did, similar to what we did, like basically expanding not just the main coaches, but like all of the extended staff. Like, we're close to 50 at this point. I know Pitt is too, and Duke is, and those were the ones that really stepped up their game. And it's paying dividends for Duke. We're talking about 9 wins, 8 wins, and now 7 with potentially 3 to go. Well, definitely 3 to go. It's been incredible. I wish that Tech was getting these results. Now people will look at the non-con with Duke and say, well, they scheduled a bunch of cupcakes and whatever. The strength of schedule, it's lower than where Tech is. Like, it's a worse strength than Tech, but it's not that much different. It really isn't. If you look at FPI, I think we're 40 there in the mid 60s. Some other metrics, there's a bigger gap, but 7 wins through 10 games for Duke is just kind of unheard of in a historic sense. They've kind of made it the norm, like I said, over the past decade plus, but I can't believe they're 7-3 this year with a new coach in year 1. And your thoughts on Manny Diaz just taking over from Elko? Do you think it was just very turnkey with what Elko had built?
It definitely was, in a sense, because they kept on David Feely, which there's a lot of people will talk about just how important strength and conditioning is, and for the long-term value of a program. And, he did great things with Elko. David Feely was at Miami with Elko, and, they're best friends. So it just made sense to keep, that key important piece on the staff. When he was first hired, I wasn't fully sure about it. I didn't exactly think that highly of him at Miami. I really wasn't a fan of the turnover chain and all of that. And I just, he gave off that big Miami vibe, which is just, not really me.
He is very Miami.
Yeah.
His dad was the mayor of Miami.
Yeah, exactly. But when you kind of look back on it, his tenure at Miami wasn't that bad. I mean, I think he was like 21 and 15, which isn't like amazing, but I felt like he was building something at Miami, and I think he got a little bit of the short end of the stick when they just wanted to toss him to the side so they could.
And name the coaches that have done well at Miami in the past 15 years. I mean, it's pretty much none. Like Manny might have had one good season. The thing that I think was a hang up for Manny, Sam, was the bad losses. Like that's what, like did they lose to FIU or FAU? There was something in there where they had like a couple ugly ones.
They had a few bad losses. And I think one of the things with Manny Diaz that always kind of held him back at Miami was a lot of the same issues that we're seeing with Cristobal. Was there just seemed to be a lack of development offensively under his tutelage. And Cristobal, obviously, with the transfer portal, has figured that out this year. They're averaging like 47 points per game. But you're seeing a little bit of that with Duke as well. Like they're not a very good offensive team. No matter really what metric you look at, whether it's traditional yards and points or whether you look at the more advanced stuff, they're not a very good offensive team. And I do wonder, are they going to be able to overcome that at Duke when you don't get the recruits and you don't get the transfers? I'll be curious to see that moving forward, Manny Diaz.
Yeah, I do think we'll talk about the defense in a little bit, but I still think like maintaining this with a coaching turnover when Elko did take guys, we took one of their best players in Peebles, and now they have a better record than us, right? Like and it's by 2 games, it's not just one. So it would be really good if Aeneas people stuck around, but I'm happy to have them on our side. So the wins were against Northwestern on the road, UNC, at NC State, FSU, Elon, UConn, and MTSU. Now UConn's not bad. They're UConn, but they're not typical UConn. But they're still, you heard those names. The best win is probably UNC, or maybe just the NC State game on the road after NC State had been playing a little bit better. But it's not, there is no win on there that is very good. But you can say the same thing about Virginia Tech's wins right now.
Yeah, I think this is part of the recipe for success at Duke that they've kind of seen over the last decade is I think they've played Northwestern like 10 times in the last 12 years. I'm not kidding. So they're going to play that game. They're going to play UConn. They're going to play Elon, NCA&T, UMass. I think they've played UMass a couple times. Like they're going to schedule a really easy non-conference and then survive the ACC. Like Dave Clawson has built an entire program at Wake Forest doing that. Like beat up on non-conference, go 3-5 in the ACC, and go to a bowl game. That's kind of their recipe for success.
When you look back on the seasons, you don't see the schedule. You just see, we won 9.
Right, and it's working because if you steal 1 or 2 conference games, all of a sudden you're at 8 wins, and it's a formula. And
or FSU has a terrible year, and you're able to win that game. Like that should have been their tough game, and it just wasn't.
I mean, the 3 best teams they've played are Georgia Tech, SMU, and Miami. They lost to Georgia Tech by 10. SMU is only by 1.
In a weird game, yeah.
They were +6 in the turnover margin and lost that game. So that is a weird game. And then Miami, they were winning that game for the whole time, and then they didn't even cover the spread. They lost by 22 points somehow. So it's when they've played good teams, they've lost. However, is Virginia Tech a good team? Like, does Virginia Tech go into that level of Georgia Tech with Haynes King? I think Tech is a lot closer to UNC, and they beat UNC by 1 on the road. So
that was
we'll see.
UNC wasn't playing awesome.
They weren't
or
playing well.
as good back at that point in the season.
No.
Yeah.
But that's the question, Chris, is are we closer to the GTs of the world, or are we right down the middle of what Duke has done? Like, beat the bad teams, lose to the good teams. Like, the rubber's going to meet the road here on Saturday night.
Yeah, exactly. And, I think by all indications, this is going to be a 1-score game. And, I think we kind of know how that's been going so far.
Yeah, that's what I'm afraid of. I mean, and it shouldn't be, because eventually, like, the odds will just play in our favor. Like, you can't lose 12 out of the first 13, can you? Like, I guess we could in 1-score games, but let me give you just a little bit of reference on the recent series with Duke. We had played Duke every year since start of the ACC, but except for last year when everything got mixed up with the different divisions and getting rid of them and all that stuff, we didn't end up playing Duke. But since we entered the ACC, we are 8-1 in Durham playing Duke. Most of our losses, in fact, I think we've lost 3 out of the last 4. 3, yeah. Over the last 10 years, we're 6-4 against Duke, which I honestly thought it might have been worse than that. But we do have a winning record against Duke over the last 10 years. Of those 4 losses, 3 have been in Blacksburg. So we tend to play better in what we call UVA is Lane Stadium North. Let's do Duke is Lane Stadium East. Let's go with that. Yeah. Because we do show up and we have a very good record there.
Are you guys, and Kirsty, I know you're a Duke fan, Pete, you follow Tech as close as anybody. Does this feel like a series that should be this close? It's like 6-4, because on one hand, it's Duke, but on the other hand, talk about how much Duke has won a lot of football games the past 5 or 6 years, and they've had some really good players. And it's one of those like series with Virginia Tech fans that is always circled as a win. Like, when we came into this season, this was a Sharpie W. It really hasn't been like that. And when Tech has beaten Duke, it's been really good wins. Like, they have a couple of ranked wins at Duke in the past 6 or 7 years.
They do. I think, and I'd be curious your perspective on this, Chris. You growing up pretty much was the worst time in Duke football history. Like, before the 2012 era, like, they won the ACC in 1989. They were god-awful for about 20 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think in terms of history, like, that 20-year period is kind of the outlier, like, being that bad for that long. And correct me if I'm wrong, but if you look back at their history, they have some decent seasons, like, going back.
Yeah. They do have a weird program in that sense. I mean, they were really dominant, in the 40s. They hosted a Rose Bowl. And then, like you mentioned, they won the ACC in '89 with Spurrier. And then, there's that really, really dark period where, I think in my childhood, they experienced 3 winless seasons. And when you really think about it, what it means to have a winless season, it is what it is. It's 0 wins for a whole year, but you can't even really imagine what that's like in college football. You barely see that with any team today, at any level. They were, in dogfights with VMI and Richmond every year. So it's really kind of, crazy that Cutcliffe was able to pull them out from where they were.
Yeah. I mean, 0-11 in 2000, 0-11 in 2001. So that's back-to-back years winless.
That's wild.
It's brutal, man. And then 05, 1-10, 06, 0-12, 07, 1-11. Like, it was so grim. I'm actually shocked you were going to games with your dad. God bless you guys.
My dad was a true original college football sicko, and our rule was always, especially back then, before the transfer portal existed, we always made a pact that we would stay for the full game if we were there to support the players. which was really hard to do back then. But, 2012 hits, they go to the bowl game for the first time in my lifetime. And, those really tough times really makes those really positive times hit that much harder, which is why it's been so difficult for me to kind of shed that Duke football fandom after all those years of Duke football pain.
And even with the bad Cutcliffe years, and we will move on to this year's game, I promise, in a second, listeners, but like even the bad Cutcliffe years are so much better than what they were getting. Like the 2-9 season in 2020, like that's nothing. And that was a weird year anyway. The other lowest total was 3-9 in 2021, and that was his final year. But like 3-9 in the mid 2000s would have been a miracle.
Yeah.
So what a weird ride. And it's cool that they're good. It has coincided exactly when we've been bad, Sam, and I think that's why it is 6-4. But if we had played last year, they probably would have beat us then too. We're lucky that we didn't play them in the series last year.
There have been some really like pivotal games in Virginia Tech history that have been Duke games. Like in Beamer's last year was a double overtime loss. 4 overtime loss. Excuse me. I confused that with the UNC double overtime loss. That was the next year, the next week, excuse me. And then you had the game after the ODU loss was the famous Dalton Keene, like 80-yard touchdown. The awesome
picture.
One of my favorite photos in Virginia Tech history was that game. Fuente's last win was that home game against Duke, and also the Duke horrible Friday night loss was like the beginning of the end for the Fuente era. So Duke has been pretty pivotal, and I'm going to tell you, this Saturday is going to be another one of those pivotal games.
Yeah. Did you were going to say something, Chris? Or
I was just going to say, what we've been talking about is why I've loved this series so much, on a personal level, but putting on like the Virginia Tech hat on, like Sam's been saying, this game has been really pivotal for a lot of the seasons. Look back at the year Virginia Tech won the Coastal. I feel like that win in Durham really kind of cemented that, this is going to be, the year Tech wins the Coastal for the first time in, however many years. And so, like you said, the last 10 years have just been so close, and it's always a really good game. And I think it's gotten to the point now where I think the Virginia Tech fan base is respecting Duke a little bit more, and I think it's got people a little nervous, but it should be a close game this year.
Yeah, the name that sticks out to me of those pivotal games, ones that hurt, that you lose, is it Brandon Connett? Am I getting that name right?
2013.
2013. We lose by 3 points. And I remember Connett getting like the crucial first down to basically seal the game for Duke. And I was so pissed because at that point, I still thought Virginia Tech was, a national program. And lo and behold, that was the beginning of the journey that we've been on. But let's talk about Saturday night here, guys. Lots of juniors and seniors on this team. And by my estimation, Duke has stayed pretty healthy throughout this year. Do you agree with that, Chris?
Yeah, I would say so. There's been one pretty significant injury, which has hurt their offense a lot, which was Jacquez Moore. He was I'm not sure if he was their leading running back last year, but he was part of their 2 running back system last year with Jordan Waters. And he's been hurt most of the year. And, when we dive into the numbers of their offense, you'll see that the running game is really struggling for Duke this year. And I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah, their offense is 116th in yards per play. We're at 65th by reference. We don't have a great offense, and we are way, way, way better than Duke in terms of that one metric.
Yeah, they're 112th in the country in adjusted EPA per play on offense. 112th.
Yeah.
And that's adjusted for schedule.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they are, I knew it was bad. And when I looked up the stats earlier, just to kind of double check, I believe they are 130th in offensive rushing success rate. So, yeah.
They're 122nd in offensive success rate with passing and rushing total. This is a bad offense.
Yeah, I mean, this is the worst offense we've faced all year. I mean, Marshall would
Yes.
be pretty close, I guess, with that one quarterback.
With Stone Earl, Marshall was
They're
pretty bad.
7-3, by the way. Did you know Marshall's 7-3?
Yeah, Marshall's pretty good now. They figured it out. They have figured it out. Yeah, this might be the worst. I mean, that ODU offense with the backup quarterback was probably worse. Like they couldn't do anything. Only
you're
time they did anything was when Tech's linebackers messed up. This is as bad of an offense as you're going to play in the ACC, though.
right.
I think,
and the thing why I
Yeah.
thought it was a good matchup is because what you said about the rushing. 124th in yards per carry. You said the success rate's like 122, 130, whatever it was. And so that is good because we struggle to stop the run. We have good corners, good DBs. Our linebackers can struggle in coverage from time to time, but Keontae Jenkins has been playing really well. Caleb Woodson's been playing well. So I really like the matchup. It's not that they don't have playmakers like Penkel and Jordan Moore both have really good receiving numbers. They both have 6 touchdowns. And Malik Murphy has been racking up yardage. It's just that it's not extremely efficient. What's the Malik Murphy experience like, Chris?
It's been really interesting. He honestly probably has the best arm talent Duke's ever had. I mean, he can really spin the ball. He can kind of struggle to get himself going a little bit, and I think part of that is due to play calling a little bit. They don't make it easy for him to start the game. They don't call any easy plays to, get his confidence up. They just say, second play of the game, we're going to throw a 50-yard bomb down the field, and it's not going to be caught. And so I think every game he just starts a little bit behind the 8 ball. But as far as talent, he's got it. And I'll be interested to see if he stays, of course, what he's able to do in the future at Duke.
One thing I liked about him was that he's not a runner at all, Sam.
No. He is not. He is a statue back. They're not really a statue.
I mean, he kind of is.
Scramble, but he doesn't want to run. I think it's part of the issue that their offense has had this year is when they run up. This is kind of difficult to explain without watching Duke football.
It is.
When you watch them play, they run very singularly focused plays. Like it'll either be a run or it will be a pass, or like their RPO will only have like one pass option. It'll usually be a slant down the middle. Chris Marv, if you're listening, they're going to run a RPO with a slant down the middle at about 8 yards. Penkel's going to be running it. Be ready for it. I'm just telling you right now. And like, if they run a pass play, the ball's leaving Malik Murphy's arm or he's getting tackled. There is no scramble, and there's usually only 1 or 2 reads. They're a very, very simplistic offense. It has caused a lot of issues, but they have avoided critical mistakes. Like they're not turning the ball over a million times. I believe Malik Murphy, he does have 8 interceptions, but they've been spaced out enough. Like they haven't had backbreaking ones.
3 of them came against Miami.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that's pretty much it, right? In the games that they've won, the offense hasn't looked good, but the offense hasn't killed them.
Mm-hmm.
They're a really good team in field position. They are 31st in net field position in the country. So
he doesn't take sacks either. For being a statue, he doesn't take sacks, which only 11 sacks on the year with 350 pass attempts. That's a very low percentage.
Yeah. So I just looked it up again. They're 31st in net field position in the country. So they're fine punting the ball. Like if they get 8 yards and punt the ball, that's a W from ATS right now.
Yeah. Well, and you know that why that is because they know their defense is going to play well for the majority of the game, and so they're absolutely comfortable conceding a punt. They're absolutely okay looking rough on offense if they know their defense is going to generate 3 takeaways a game.
Mm-hmm. Which they very well could do on Saturday. So let me take a second to talk about our sponsor, and we'll get to the defense. 2 Deep Hokies Under the Influence is brought to you by Jack and Coke. 2 legends, 1 can, Jack and Coke. You can see the can on your screen. I took a picture earlier today at my local beer store, wine store, whatever. All of the Jack and Coke plus Jack and Ginger was there, including Jack and Cherry Coke, which I'm very intrigued and I haven't even had yet. So I had to pick that up. Jack Daniel's Tennessee Whiskey and Coca-Cola, Coca-Cola Zero, or Cherry Coke are now available in a can at your local grocery and convenience stores. 2 Legends, 1 can, Jack and Coke. And as always, when you're having those, please drink responsibly. Sam, I wanted to ask you what you're drinking. Are you having a beer tonight?
Oh yeah, yeah, I definitely need a beer. So I'm working through this pack of Star Hill out of Virginia. This is the Reviver. It's a red IPA. So it's kind of it's an IPA red ale mix.
Hmm.
It's this really
Whoa,
dark
baby.
maroon color. Pretty darn cool. The can is very cool. It's got an awesome snake. I love snakes. So
It's kind of a
awesome
Hokie can.
Kind of, yeah. It's autumnal for sure. The
Autumnal.
beer is good. If you like a red ale, you'll really like this one. It's more red ale forward than it is IPA. Like it doesn't have the citrus IPA kind of funk to it. For the beer nerds out there, a lot of head on this beer. Like it took me, I had to like pour it in twos. So it's a nice beer. It's heavy-ish. It's more on the heavy side than is the light side, but it's good. I'm not a huge fan of red ales, but I do like this one. Solid 3.5. Like it's a good beer. Would have again.
Nice. I'm drinking the Little Wolf from Zero Gravity. I bought this primarily because I just thought the can was cool. It's got a navy blue can with a wolf on there, kind of a geometric design. Burlington, Vermont is where you can find Zero Gravity. They make the cone head. I think they make the green State or something like that. They're in a lot of beer shops. One thing about their beers is they tend to be real bitter. Like if you get the Conehead, it is like a very, very bitter IPA, which some people really like that. This is a pale ale, 4.7%, also on the bitter side. Would go well with some food. It's not my favorite style of beer, but I just I wanted to try it. Didn't want to go too heavy tonight. Little Wolf, I would have it again. Sam, I'd probably give it a 3.25. It's just not my style, but
Cool can though.
that's me. The can's amazing. And
Yep.
that's a lot of the reason anyone buys a beer these days, because there's so many of them.
Yeah.
You look at the can, maybe you look at the description, you're like, all right, I'll pull the trigger. And I was doing a build your own 6-pack, so I'm not invested past one here.
It's hard at this point. I was at a Total Wine trying to make my own 6-pack, and I've had that one, had that one, had that one. It's I feel like you don't get as many. There aren't as many distributors from out of state, like far out of state. You're not finding as many things from Oregon like you used to. Like Deschutes isn't really as big as it used to be on the East Coast. You're not finding as much stuff from Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont as you used to. You're not finding
now
as much
where
stuff
I
from
am,
Prince
I will
Area.
get that stuff. Like, and I actually today I saw a Veil can on my shelf, but because that's the other thing. Not all of them in the buy one and build your own. They don't all like do that for every beer. They choose certain ones that allow for it. But I got a bunch of holiday stuff because towards the end of this season, we'll be doing some more like sweater weather, Christmassy kind of beers. And so I picked up a bunch of those. Yeah.
Got a few.
All right. And Chris, you are not drinking. I saw you drinking something. It's not beer. You're just hydrating, keeping it chilled tonight, and that's cool.
Yep.
Let's go to the defense. 16th in yards per play for this unit. It's a very stout group. I talked about the juniors and seniors, and that definitely applies to the defense. They're spreading around the tackles. 6 different guys have 5+ tackles per game. And when I was looking at the numbers, Chris, like I almost thought they were playing a 3-4 based on the distribution of tackles. Now, I know that's not Manny Diaz's base defense, but his aggressive style, I know he'll run some fire blitzes, some fire zones out of a 3-4 setup on occasion.
Yeah, he's got a lot of really athletic guys on the edge too. Guys that were here before, they were just kind of behind other guys, but a guy like VJ Anthony is having a pretty good year. Wesley Williams also having a great year.
Yeah, great year.
So it's honestly surprising how well they're playing this year, given the significant level of talent that they lost last year in the portal, on the D line and also in the linebacking group. But credit to them, they pulled in 2 linebackers from the transfer portal. and Ozzie Nicholas and Alex Howard. Both of those guys are having really good years, and they've just meshed really well. I don't really know how else to explain it other than they just play well together.
The linebacking core is incredible. I mean, Nicholas, Howard, Bergeron, and Freeman are all playing really well, all putting up numbers. And that's a real credit to Manny and whoever is running the defense. I can't think of his name right now. But oh yeah, to get those guys to come in and instantly know where to be, their reads, where to make the tackle, and all that kind of stuff. It's something that I would kill to have at Virginia Tech, is that kind of cohesiveness on that side of the ball. Sam, we talked a little bit about their tackles for loss. They're third nationally in TFL per game. Diaz loves negative plays. Do you think that's a for real stat, or do you think that's a schedule stat?
It's okay. So it is a real stat, as in they are good at creating havoc plays. They have a 15.1% havoc rate, which is let me sort by havoc rate. Excuse me, but it's pretty high up there. It is
sounds good.
It is fourth in the country.
Oh my!
So
God.
they're up there with Tennessee, Texas, and Boise State. So they're up there. However, 16 of their tackles for loss came against Elon. It's just an important asterisk, no, right?
Yeah.
Like
that's a lot, though. Even if it's Elon, that's a lot.
That's a lot, but they're still really good.
Yeah.
There is an element of, like, Virginia Tech's defense is very bend, don't break, right? They'll give up a few first downs, but you're going to have to really put a drive together to score on this Virginia Tech defense. Duke kind of has the opposite philosophy. They're going to get after you. And if you get past that, you're probably going to score. Not a lot of teams have been able to get past that. They haven't played a ton of good offenses, but it's worked out for them looking at their opponents. I'd be curious how aggressive they are against Virginia Tech, who hasn't been very explosive this year on offense, but in the past has been very explosive. So we'll see if they try to switch that up a little bit. There could be potential for whoever's playing quarterback to get some big plays downfield, but it's a very aggressive defense.
It is. And they do the cover zero blitzes. They do the fire zones, which is typically 5 rushers, 6 DBs, 3 under, 3 over, depending on how they want to run it. But like that, it's a tricky defense. He tries to like lure you into traps. And for a Colin Schlee, who hasn't been starting, he is experienced, but like he hasn't been starting every game. He could fall into those traps. And I very much worry about it. And Sam, I don't think he's taking his foot off the gas. Like I think they're going to be bringing the heat and trying to like rattle whoever our quarterback is.
If Drones is in there, I think you see them blitz. If Drones is not the one in there, if Schlee is in there, I would expect them to maybe be
just a little bit more conservative.
A little bit more conservative, because that's Schlee's, maybe his most elite attribute is extending plays. And so I don't know if you want to send 6 guys and then Schlee just spins out of it, gets to the outside, and now he's a threat to really, really run. I don't know. Maybe it changes between who's playing Drones or Schlee, or maybe he's just crazy and wants to blitz every play.
I mean, I think
remember the
that's
Titans
what
style.
he skews more toward. But like Chris, if we're getting blitzed, who's the guy that are we most worried about, that we need to block?
You know, they do their DBs are really good at coming off the edge and getting there quickly and wrapping up. One thing that, you know, we wish would have happened in the Clemson game, you know, but that's one thing that they're really, really successful at, is one thing they're really good at under Elko. So a guy like, you know, Jalen Stinson does that a lot. Terry Moore is really good at it too. But another really underrated thing about the defense is the linebackers are really good in coverage. I think the linebacking unit has, I don't know, maybe 5 interceptions on the year, which I feel like is kind of high for that kind of unit.
Yeah, there's 11 interceptions on the team in general this year. I noticed that someone had a couple, but they were pretty spread. And I know a bunch of them came from that linebacking core, whether it was, is Hall a linebacker? No, Howard.
Hall,
11.
Howard, yeah.
Yeah. Hall's a DT. But yeah, Howard is the one I'm thinking of. 11 tackles for loss for that guy. He gets in there, man. And so They do love to bring those safeties off the edge, though. You're right. Stinson and Moore or something. Both of them are stuff on the stat sheet. They like get forced fumbles. They get pass breakups. I mean, it's like a Lovie Smith Chicago Bears defense where like they're just always like ripping at the ball, like just aggressive football players. Like that want to get their nose dirty. And we have to match that physicality. Like I feel like Duke is a fairly physical team.
Yeah, they are. And guys, they're not, necessarily, they don't come across that physically imposing. I mean, Stinson is like 5'8", and that's a generous, height measurement. But he is a really good tackler for his size. And I think that that's a general theme across this defense is, they don't physically, on the screen don't look that intimidating, but, typically they're getting two guys on you every time, and they're really sure-handed tacklers.
Do you feel good about Pickett playing in this game? He's one of your corners. He has like 6 pass breakups on the year. I know he was injured. I'm not sure if you heard anything about that or not.
I have not. I haven't really been following the Duke injury report as much this week.
Well, there hasn't been much, like, to be honest with you. Like, that's the only player that I felt like was in question. And maybe
part of the success this year has been staying healthy. And I know that's, I don't think the word luck is the correct word to use in that sense, but their best players have not missed games this year.
Mm-hmm. And that theme of tackling goes across the entire defense, because even their cornerback Rivers, his 9 pass breakups, he's a really good tackler too. Yeah. And so it's going to be a really stiff challenge. Let's move to our overall thoughts, fellas. You look at the line, it's VT -3. That's what I saw earlier today. I think last week on the pod, Sam, we were both talking about somewhere between a pick'em and 2.5, and now it's even higher in terms of where it's coming in for Tech.
From a pure betting perspective, I understand where the line is. Tech is a team that's lost a lot of close games. Duke's a team that's won a lot. You expect that to flip at some point. The matchup with how bad Duke's offense has been, and Tech has played really well against, this is going to sound stupid, but when Tech plays a not great offense, they shut them down like completely, right? Look what they did to Boston College. It was 21 points, but what they did to ODU, what they did to Marshall, what they did to Georgia Tech. Heck, last week against Clemson had 24 points. 10 of them, they started the drive inside Tech's 40-yard line, right? So that, I think, is playing into a little bit of the line, compiled with some injury question marks with Virginia Tech. Like, I think if Drones and Tootin are healthy, this line is probably like 5.5 to 6, like right under a touchdown. So that's, from a betting perspective, that's what I'm seeing.
I hear all that, but they're not 100%, even if they are playing. And that's why I'm a little surprised. I mean, I'm not surprised because I did predict it would be 2.5. But I guess somewhere in my head, I kind of thought Tootin and Drones would be surefire playing. And that was probably silly, because now I'm looking at this matchup as I dove deeper into it, and I feel like it should be a pick 'em at best, because it is a game where, like, it's going to be a defensive game. They have an okay offense, but it plays directly into our defensive strength. They don't run the ball that well, which would be the only thing that really frightened me. But they're very aggressive on defense, which does frighten me. And so this game most likely will come down to like a batted ball that gets intercepted or a blocked punt, or it's going to be some of these freaky, long play by Colin Schlee on a scramble,
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if we can win this game if Tootin doesn't play well.
I think you are hoping for a game somewhat similar to the first 3 quarters of the Syracuse game, where you're able to get some big plays on offense and your defense shows up. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't think Tech is going to be able to methodically drive down the field on Duke. I think it's going to be a few big plays here or there that get them into position, I think is what they need. They have not had a lot of explosive plays this year, which was something they did really well last year, is these explosive plays. Not a lot of them this year.
For Duke or for
Tech? For Tech.
Yeah, okay.
Well, neither team.
Chris, what are your thoughts on the overall matchup?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of specific things that have to go for either team for them to, pull away. I mean, for Virginia Tech, are we going to see more than 0 carries by a healthy running back this week?
I certainly hope so.
Are they going to limit the turnovers? I think if Virginia Tech has 0 turnovers, I would almost guarantee it's a Virginia Tech win, because Duke is so they really need the defense to get their offense going in a weird way. They don't typically generate their own momentum. The defense kind of hands it to them on a silver platter.
Interesting. Okay.
And then, one key, we haven't talked about him a whole lot, but Jordan Moore is really a guy that makes some really big plays for Duke down the field. Duke has a lot of 3 and outs, but when they don't, typically it's because they get a 30, 40-yard play down the field by Jordan Moore doing something you'd see on Sunday. So those are just kind of the key things that I'd be looking at. I would probably give, the advantage to Tech regardless of, who's at quarterback. I actually think Schlee would be a better fit, just because, Drones has kind of struggled in the past game this season, even when he's been healthy. This is a really good, secondary and linebacking core in coverage. So I think, having a guy under center that is going to be athletic, he's going to be able to scramble, be able to get those, 5-10 yard scrambles is going to be really important in a game like this.
Is it weird that we haven't heard a thing about Pop Watson, Sam? Like,
no, it's not weird.
No,
he's the 3rd string quarterback.
I know, but neither of the other 2 guys are great. Drones is hurt. I'm just, and in terms of legs, like, he's got legs and he can run.
He has 2 of them.
He physically, literally has legs.
No,
and he has flashed at times with some playmaking ability, whether it be in a spring game or whatever.
No,
we're not going there. We're not going there.
We're not going. Like,
all
a
right,
coach,
fine.
I think a lot of the positivity with Pop Watson, I think, has to do with we've only heard about him, and like, your coach isn't going to say like, yeah, our 3rd string quarterback sucks.
Yeah,
like, he's not going to say that. So I think they should feel good about Colin Schlee. Like, Schlee's won a lot of football games at a high level, right? Like, this guy's beaten Boise State in a bowl game. He's taken Kent State to 8 wins and a conference title. Like, he's done a lot. He's a playmaker. I think even at 90%, 85%, whatever you want to call it, he's good enough to beat Duke. Like, he's a good quarterback.
I mean, he was good enough to beat Syracuse. The defense just wasn't good enough that day.
You know what? The way he played in the last few minutes, he might have been good enough to beat Clemson. If his receivers helped him out a little bit and he plays a full game, probably score more than one
Gets all the
touchdown.
Snaps in practice in terms of prep. Like, it might have been a miscalculation to start Drones against Clemson, but when your number 1 guy can go and wants to go, it's hard not to do that. But to what Chris said about the running backs getting carries, we harped on it in the recap, Sam. Like, if too many injured guys, if Tootin isn't playing or isn't 100%, you've got to get Coney some carries. Like, whatever running back is healthy, you have to get healthy running back carries, as Chris said.
I mean, Coney needs at least 10 carries in this game, regardless.
He's a good player.
He is a good player, and they've liked him ever since he got to campus. Like, as soon as he started the winter workouts, they were like, earmark this kid. He's going to be good. And so he showed up, 10 yards of carry in the Syracuse game. Let him do some stuff, because that's literally Duke's biggest weakness. The only weakness, I should say, their worst strength on defense is because we took Aeneas Peoples away. It's the defensive tackles and it's the run game yards per carry. That's their weakest aspect that we can attack. And that's what we do best. So do it.
Yeah.
And one thing I wanted to bring up just real quick that we haven't talked about yet either. One thing Virginia Tech does have a massive advantage on in this game is special teams. It's something Duke has really, really struggled with this season, specifically in kickoff coverage, punt coverage, and field goal blocking. Specifically those 3 things they have really struggled with this season. And it wouldn't surprise me if because I feel like Tech has had a couple of good kickoff returns this year. It wouldn't surprise me if we saw a long one on Saturday.
Jalen Lane feels due. He's had a lot of good
He does feel
returns.
due.
He feels due for a punt return touchdown.
And Lane is someone that it's been a little nicked up at times too this year. And maybe the bye week will help everyone feel a little bit healthier. We're going to need Steven Gosnell too, man, because he's our best receiver, I think, at this point in terms of just being reliable. They all kind of struggled against Clemson, but him and Lane are our two best guys. We need them out there. We need them available for Colin Schley if he's going to be throwing those slant passes to those guys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I also think this would be a really good game for a player like Aiden Green, who kind of lives in that 10 to 15 yard crossing route area. If you're going up against a more aggressive defense that might have some defensive back blitzes, this would be a good game to see him.
Get some sticky gloves, man. Just like find the most tacky gloves you can get.
Spider tack.
We'll bring a good crowd to Wallace Wade. These two gentlemen will be there. I'm jealous. I know Billy and Pat are going to be there. Rob Irby's going to be there. It's a family affair down in Durham this weekend. Have a good time, fellas. And if let's not even do the thing if we don't win, because it's not going to be pretty. We all know it's not going to be pretty. If we don't win, it means that we're at best matching last year's regular season record. And so that wouldn't be good. It's already been a disappointing season. Let's not add to the disappointment. Let's go down to Durham and get a win in what is a very winnable game. Let me do a quick read for Roback and we'll do our picks and get out of here. 2 Deep Hokies Under the Influence is brought to you by Roback, the performance activewear designed for those who crave activity. You guys can use code 2DeepVT to get 20% off your order at roback.com. I'm actually planning on buying my brother-in-law some stuff. Hopefully he's not listening to know that I'm going to get him some Roback. But if you are, Chaz, you'll get a nice polo from me. Use code 2DeepVT, 20% off your order. Grab a quarter zip, grab some joggers, a hoodie. Their polos are amazing for the golf course. Roback, crave activity. Some good games this weekend. Me and Sam discussed a couple of them, but I've got some updated lines, and I wanted you guys to just give me your picks, all right? Indiana at Ohio State. 11.5, Sam, is what it is on the pick'em. What are you going with?
I'm going with Indiana. I think Ohio State has some serious offensive line issues. They've already down their starting left tackle. They're now down their starting center for the year. I think Indiana keeps this close. I don't know if they win, but I think they keep it close.
Chris, what do you got?
No, I would love to take Indiana. I think it's a great story. But I think I'll just take Ohio State. Just, they're the favorite. And I think it's time for them to kind of step up and show why they're one of the top teams in the country.
I'm going to go with Indiana as well. I was on the fence, but I just feel like they can keep it close. Ole Miss at Florida. Florida 9.5-point underdogs. What do you got in this one, Chris? Sam's already chomping over there.
Yeah. I haven't really been following that much of the SEC this year, which is weird, but I'm going to go with Ole Miss.
Sam, you're going with the Gators?
I placed my bet today for Gators money line at like plus 310.
Ooh.
I think it's a very Lane Kiffin spot.
It is a Lane Kiffin spot.
It's a Lane Kiffin spot.
Let me give you a theory, though.
Okay.
We just saw Florida beat LSU.
Uh-huh.
Now they're playing again in the swamp.
Mm-hmm.
Ole Miss has a penchant for kind of not being great in these games. Doesn't even necessarily have the same brand power that Florida does. And this line is still plus 9.5. I'm going to take Ole Miss because I feel like there's something a little bit off about this.
There is potential that Florida only scores like 10 points. That is a potential outcome.
The Ole Miss defense has been incredible.
They're really good. Yeah, the last time they were this good, they were cheating their ass off. So
I was looking at sacks and hurries, and Duke is top 5 in the country. I'm virtually certain. I haven't checked every team, but I checked a lot of the top teams, and they're incredible. Duke has so many sacks and hurries. Ole Miss is like blowing it out of the water. How many they have? Like 46 sacks right now. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm taking Ole Miss. SMU at UVA. I will go first. I'm going to take the Hoos. I don't feel good about it, but 9.5 in the ACC with the Hoos at home. I'm going to take them. Sam?
I'm going to go SMU at that line. And my biggest reason being is because we just saw SMU play a pretty bad game against Boston College and win by 10.
Fair. What do
So
you got, Chris?
that's why I'm going there.
I think I'm going to go with SMU. I believe if SMU wins, that locks them up to go to the ACC championship, right?
I believe so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm going to take SMU on that spot.
I just, even though it's UVA, I kind of want the old guard of the ACC to like smack SMU here. Like like an American team has come into our conference and is about to go undefeated. Like it's pretty frustrating. Penn State at Minnesota. Minnesota plus 12.5. What do you got, Chris?
Man, that one's.
It's so nasty.
Let's just go Penn State. Let's just go Penn State.
We got Chris going chalk here.
I want to go Minnesota. However, like this is where Penn State has made a living, is blowing out mid-tier to lower tier Big Ten teams.
Yeah. They've gone to Minnesota and caught some losses though. I mean,
Yeah.
there's been a couple. I'm going to take Minnesota plus 12.5. Again, this is another one, Sam, where my theory about Florida could come into play. Like, okay, we know Minnesota's a decent team. So why is the line 12.5? And that should concern Minnesota better potentially, but I'm going to take it anyway. Army at Notre Dame. Notre Dame, 15.5 point favorites on the pick'em. I'm taking the Black Knights, Sam. What are you doing?
At 15.5, I'm taking Army.
Okay. Yeah, I was surprised it was that big, but that's what it is in the ESPN pick'em.
Yep.
What do you got, Chris?
Yep. Yeah, I'm not going all chalk. Definitely going to go Army. I think they're going to give Notre Dame a scare.
I certainly
if they win this game, I cannot wait.
It's a bigger story
fallout
than Indiana if they win this game.
Okay.
Yes. It is
because Army going 10-0 and beating Notre Dame, who's a top 10 team, would be outrageous.
Now, Tulane did just shut out Navy's triple option offense.
They did. Tulane's very good.
There's another hurdle for the Black Knights after this one, and they would still have to beat Navy, and that's always a toss-up game. But
that hurdle is great for Army in the sense that if they do beat Notre Dame and if they do beat Tulane, they're for sure in the playoff because they'd be undefeated and they would have a couple really good wins.
You want to get stupid? If they beat Notre Dame on a neutral field and then a top 20 Tulane team, as well as a win against Navy to end the season, are they like the number 10 team in the country and they get the bye?
I did not think about the bye aspect, but it would screw over potentially the Big 12 or the ACC.
13-0 with 2 top 25 wins, one of them being against Notre Dame.
Yeah, it would screw over the Big 12 because the ACC, whoever wins, whether it's
Clemson,
that
whoever wins it is
they're going to be the 4 seed or the 3 or 4 seed. But like the Big 12 needs to be careful here because only if Army does this, which is extremely unlikely, but it's fun to kind of root for. That's for sure. All right. That'll do it for picks. That'll do it for the podcast. Chris, thank you so much for coming on with us and sharing some of your insight and life experience as a Duke fan. You earned this podcast appearance by back-to-back 0-11 seasons or whatever it was. But no, it was a pleasure having you again, buddy.
Yeah, thanks, Chris.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's always good to talk some Tech Duke football with Tech fans. I've always told people is, I've always loved Duke, but being a Virginia Tech fan is just a lot more fun. So,
well,
I'd rather have a fan base. Have a fan base. We're all sad, but we're sad together.
No, that is true. That is true. And we can be sad about the basketball team tonight because they did end up falling to Jacksonville
by a significant margin.
Yeah, it was 74-64. So not super close. I think the spread was Tech -10 and we lost by 10. So
they're up 10 at halftime too.
Yeah. What can you do? Well, this was fun. Hopefully the football team will get us a win on Saturday. And until next time, go Hokies.
Go Hokies.